Hi everyone, I am here with a true story. Angels and Wonders, True Stories of Heaven on Earth. I love the quote on this one. Have you guys ever watched the movie Angels in the Outfield? With Kevin Costner, I believe. Watched it years ago. Anyway, the quote is from Angels in the Outfield. Even though you can't see us, we're always watching. Angels. I love that. Anyway, this story is called The God Squad. As a street kid, Mike learned early that life was full of dangers. He was small and slight, with a shaky self-esteem, and he soon developed a strong fear of any kind of physical violence. There was no use praying about his physical safety either. To Mike, God was a deity, interested in rules and punishment, not concerned with an ordinary kid from the Bronx. By the time Mike graduated from high school, the Vietnam War was underway. There was no money for college, he explains, and since many of my cousins and brothers had been drafted into the army, I followed. Perhaps as a soldier he would overcome his fear of violence. There's going to be a lot of violence in the army. I don't know if that had been a good place for him to go. And if they were poor, they probably could have got financial aid. Thank you, my love. Sorry, I get to trying to help these people. Like they can hear me. Mike came through Vietnam unscathed but still anxious, almost on a lark, and because few job opportunities loomed, he took the test for the New York City Police Force. He's pretty brave for someone who's afraid of violence, along with 50,000 other applicants. Geesh. Mike was astonished when he was one of the 400 hired. Well, good for you. You got to get tough because some of those people are crazy and they're violent. Now he would have to get over his fear. Yes, you will, Mike. But he didn't. Mike worked as a patrol officer, first in Harlem, later in Manhattan. Due to anti-war, police officers were under attack by many, and morale was low. This increased Mike's on-the-job stress. We were the cops on the front line, the ones who went into situations all alone, he points out. I got seasoned real quick, but I continued to be afraid. One evening on street patrol, Mike experienced such a deep anxiety attack that he thought he was dying. My body literally shook as if I would explode, he says. What was it all about, he asked himself. What was he doing out here in this high-risk environment where fear tore him apart every night? Just then a young black woman stopped in front of him and grabbed his hand. Is anything the matter, officer? She asked. Mike didn't answer, but he held on. I didn't want to let go, he explains. I felt something wonderful coming from her. I didn't know it then, but it was the love of Jesus, a love I had never experienced. See what I tell you guys? The love of Jesus is like the love you could not experience from anything or anybody in this world. The love of Jesus and God is the only kind of love. It's a one and only kind of love. It's not like any other kind of love in the world. It was the love of Jesus, a love I had never experienced. That's right, because you'll never experience another love like that. The woman led Mike to a storefront Pentecostal church where people were singing, dancing, and praising the Lord. Mike thought it wasn't at all like the flickering candles in those huge formal New York cathedrals I'd been used to. A nameless hunger came over him, and a few nights later he read the Bible at home for the first time. Proud of you, Mike. Good for you. He came upon the words of John 3:17, "For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world might be saved through him." Mike closed the book. "Jesus, whoever you are, help me," he prayed. A few weeks later, Mike answered a call for assistance from a fellow officer making an arrest in the subway at 72nd and Broadway. Mike ran past one officer still in the parked squad car and continued down the streets. The cop was attempting to handcuff the suspect, but he was resisting, Mike says. A crowd was growing, and people were trying to rescue the suspect. They should be trying to help the cop. What's wrong with these people? I worked my way through and helped the cop get him handcuffed, but we were surrounded. How were we going to get upstairs? The crowd was furious at the arrest. Why? Hands shoved Mike toward the edge of the platform. "Throw him onto the tracks," someone yelled. What's wrong with these psycho people? Mike felt a blow against the side of his head and heard with dread the sound of an approaching train. "Jesus," he murmured, "help!" Suddenly, two large African-American men loomed in front of him. "Follow us, officer," one said. The other somehow made a little opening in the densely packed crowd. Relieved, Mike pushed the prisoner directly behind these two unsuspected guardians. The crowd moved back, and with the other officer behind him, Mike and his prisoner followed the two men across the platform and up the stairs. On the street, however, there was more danger. Another gang had formed around the patrol car, and the driver was getting nervous, Mike says. The black guys had been right ahead of us, running interference all the way. But now, as Mike shoved the prisoner in the car and turned to thank his rescuers, they were nowhere in sight. More angels. How could he have missed them? As the squad car pulled away, everyone sighed in relief. "Thanks, Mike," the subway officer said. "You did a great job getting us through that crowd." "Yeah, thanks to those two big black guys," Mike answered. "What guys?" "The ones that said follow us. You saw them. They muscled everyone aside." The officer looked puzzled. "I didn't see anyone but you." Mike stopped. He was getting a strange feeling. Just last night, in his ongoing quest to understand the Bible, he had read from Hebrews about ministering spirits sent from heaven to help in times of distress. Could the black men have been angels? Exactly what they were. Who they were. No police officers didn't see angels. Well, why couldn't they? Not unless they were having mental breakdowns. That's not true. But although Mike's heart had raced during the subway episode, he realized suddenly that he was not as afraid as he ordinarily was. Something was definitely different. A few weeks later, he was assisting another officer, making an arrest. The suspect broke free and ran, Mike says. I tackled him, and we fell into a hole in the street. Jeez. Where the Con Edison crews had been digging. The suspect landed first, and I fell on top of him, making it easy to handcuff him, but the hole was too deep for us to get out. We had to wait for backup. When extra officers arrived, they hauled the prisoner out of the hole. Then they grabbed Mike's hands and pulled him up. "Lucky that you landed on him. You could have been hurt," one officer remarked. "Yeah," Mike murmured. Again, he was filled with anxiety. Would he never be free of it? And then, near the side of the excavation, he saw two large black men wearing Con Edison helmets, smiling at him as he passed. They were the same two. He knew it. But when he looked back, they had vanished. Over the next few months, Mike spent a lot of time thinking. He was in a unique position, he knew. He had already begun to witness to other police officers. Wonderful. Even to people on the street, about how knowing Jesus was changing his life. God bless you, Mike. Maybe God was building his confidence so that he would have both the physical and mental courage to do whatever he was asked to do. Yes, preach to those criminals. But how would he know for sure? One afternoon, Mike went into a restaurant for lunch. He had passed 2 diners at a table before he realized. He turned in amazement. They were the same 2 black men, both looking directly at him. Joy flooded his spirit. I couldn't help it, he says. I winked at them. Each man winked back. Mike could hardly keep from laughing out loud. He seated himself, then looked back. The table was empty. It was the sign he had needed. From that point on, although Mike continued to have occasional anxious moments on the job, he never felt alone. Sometimes he'd sense that he was being prepared for an upcoming dangerous moment. Occasionally he would walk into angry crowds, disarm gunmen, or display sudden strength, all without being injured. It wasn't the sort of thing one would put in a police report, but Mike understood. I knew now that Jesus was right beside me and would never leave me, he says. Jesus and 2 very heavenly bodyguards. That is wonderful. And him witnessing to people, that is even more wonderful. He's helping to bring more people to Jesus. And let's hope some of those criminals get brought to Jesus. Amen. Good night, guys.